Hi guys, in this video I will show you how to create a quiz app like this. As you can see, for every question we are having a time limit. So the time limit is over, it is redirecting us to the next question. So we are also having an animation effect which is applying for every second. So and if you select any option from these questions, it is redirecting us to the next question. So this is the last question from this quiz. So if I select any option, it is redirecting us to the result page, and in the result page we are displaying all the correct answers as well as the user score. So let's create this quiz app. So first of all, let's go to command prompt and let's create a folder with the name quiz app, and let's go inside this folder quiz app and open it on VS Code by using code.command. Now our folder is opened in VS Code, and inside this let's create a HTML file with name quiz.html, and now let's create a CSS file with name quiz.css as well as a JavaScript file with name quiz.js. So after that, let's create a boilerplate from this HTML file and link our CSS file by using this link tag, and let's link our JavaScript file by using this script tag, and inside this we have to give this source and then quiz.js. So inside this let's create a div tag with name quiz container. So I have created this div tag because as you can see we are having a container, and inside that container we have added some content like time left, javascript quiz, and then question and then options. So now inside this quiz container let's create this content which is time left 10 seconds. So I'm going to write that inside a paragraph tag like time left. For now let's make this as a static, but this value should be dynamic because we have to update this seconds for we have to update this value for every second, right? So that will be updated once we are going to write a code inside this javascript file. For now let's keep it as it is. So let's give a class name for this like time left. So after that we're having this javascript is content, right? So let's create that and keep it inside this h2 tag like JavaScript with. After that, we're having a question. So let's create that and let's make that inside h3 tag. So let's make it like what is JavaScript. So this should be dynamic, but for visibility, I'm adding this content. First of all, let me open this on live server so that you can understand. So our output is looking like this. So now after the question, we are having options, right? So as you can see, there are multiple elements in options. So we have to use a div tag for these options. So let's create a div tag with name options with class name options. So after that, we have to display the result, right? So for that I'm going to use this result container with the div tag with class name result container. Let's keep it as it is for now, we will update it later. So now as you can see our output is looking like this, but this content should be in the center of the document. So for that, let's go inside this quiz.css file and let's select the body. Let's change the background color to some black and display flex. Let's make the justify content center so that our content will be centered. As you can see, let's change the font color from black to white. Color white. So now it's visible. Let's give some margin top of some 120 pixels. Let's give a border for our quiz container. So let's select that by using dot quiz container, and let's give some border of 1px solid gray. We're going to remove this soon because it is looking ugly, right? Here you can see there is no border. We will remove it later. So now let's give some padding as well as border radius for this quiz container. Let's give some padding of 50 pixels. Give some border radius of 10 pixels. Okay, now it's looking good. So after that, we have to make this time left to be top right side inside this quiz container. So let's select this time left. So the time left is inside this quiz container. So let's select that dot quiz container dot time left. Let's make this as position fixed at right of 10 pixels as well as top of 10 pixels. So now if you see, it is going here because this will the parent of this element is body. We have to make the parent of this element to be this quiz container. So for that we have to give position relative here. After that we have to give position of absolute for this time left so that the parent of this time left will be this quiz container. So now if you see the output, it is looking good, right? You can see it is at top. Let's increase the font size of this. So for that I have to give font size here of 20 pixel. Also let's change the font style to be this. As you can see, I think it's looking ugly compared to this. So the name of this font style is Gilsans. Let's add that for our body by using font family Gilsans. So now if you see our output, the font style is changed. After that, so now let's add an animation like this for this. So as you can see, we are getting some red color box shadow which is around this border. So this is our quiz container, right? So we have to go inside our quiz container, and inside the quiz container we have to add a property called animation, and inside this I'm going to the first property value will be the animation name. I'm going to name it as neon. You can give whatever you want. After that we have to give animation duration, like in for how many seconds our animation will be applied. I'm going to add 1 second. And so after that we have to give a value for animation timing function. I'm going to give a value of linear, which means the styles. So like the animation will be applied with same speed from beginning to end. So to know more about this, go to W3 schools so that you can understand. So after that, we have to give iteration count. I'm going to give infinity because I want to apply animation like this for infinite times. That's why I have given infinity. So now let's give our animation. So to select the animation name, we have to give at the rate keyframes and then replace this identifier with your animation name. So I have given animation name as neon, so I have to give neon here. So after that I'm adding like 25%, and it is 25%, I'm going to add box shadow of 80 pixels of red color, as well as when it is 100%, I'm going to again give the box shadow as 80 pixels red. So now if you see our output, you can see our animation is applied for every second with these box shadow colors of red, as you can see. It will be infinite. So the styles are applied for every second for infinite times because of these property values. Now let's write our JavaScript logic inside this quiz.js file. So inside this, I'm going to create a variable with name questions. So as the name suggests, this questions variable will store all our questions with an array of objects. So I have already copied some four questions. I'm pasting it here. So these are the four objects. So each object have a one property question which stores the question, and we have another property called options, and inside these options we are going to store all the options. Since options are more than one element, we have to store those in an array. And then we have another property called answer. Inside that answer we are going to give the value of the correct answer for the question. So now, so we have to loop through this array of objects and display each question for 10 seconds. So after 10 seconds, we have to move move into the next question. So now I'm going to create an array with name correct answers, and inside this correct answers, I'm going to paste all correct answers. We need this because we have to display all the correct answers in the result page. So since we have more than one, we have to store this in an array. Let's copy the third answer and then paste it here, and then last answer, which is this. So now after that, first we have to display the first question, right? So the first question is inside this first object, and this first object index number is 0, right? This is the index of 0, this is the index 1, this is index 2, this is index 3, right? So first, let's give a variable name like current index, and inside this should be NT. So initially the value is 0. So now let's create a function with name display question. As the name suggests, this function is responsible for displaying all these questions. So inside this, first we have to create a variable some with name. Let's give it as current question. So inside this current question, first we have to get the first index value. So the first index value is 0, right? And that value is we are storing it inside this current index value. So for this current question, we have to give this questions array and then access the first object, which is the index number of 0, and that 0 is inside this current index. So I have to give current index here. Now for the first iteration, this current question variable is referencing this first object. So now after that, here we have to write. So in order to change our, so this is the question object. This is question, right, which is inside this h3 tag. Let's give a class name for this question because we have to make this content to be dynamic. So let's give a class name like question. So I have to remove this because this value should be dynamic. So now if you see the output, we don't have any question. We are going to display the question here. So let's select all these HTML tags inside our JavaScript file. So first let's select this page container. So I'm going to select that here. document dot query selector. Since we are going to select that by using class name, we have to use dot and then the class name is quiz container. And now let's store this inside a variable like quiz container is equal. So since now this quiz container variable is referencing our HTML tag with class name quiz container. So now let's select this p tag with class name time left. So I'm going to create another variable name like time left, and inside this I'm going to select the paragraph tag with class name time left. Now let's select this question. Before that we have to give class name for this as well, like heading, because we have to update this value from JavaScript quiz to result in the result page. So this value should be dynamic. Since it is dynamic, we have to select that in our JavaScript file. Let's select that by creating a variable called heading. Inside this we are going to select that heading with class name heading. So dot heading, and then now let's select this question with class. Now let's select this h3 tag with class name question and store it inside a variable called question. Let's select that by using document.query selector and then name, which is question. After that, let's select these options. I'm going to create a variable called options, and inside this I'm going to select that div tag with class name options. So now, since we want to display question inside this h3 tag, we have already selected this h3 tag inside our JavaScript file and store it inside a variable called question. So now let's give that and then use .html since we want to add a content inside our h3 tag. So after that we have to display question, right? So the question is inside this question property, and this object is stored inside our current question variable. So we have to give current question dot question. So now we have successfully rendered the question. So after that we have to display options. So since options is an array, we have to loop through this array. So for that we have to use current question and then options, and then I'm going to use for each. So for each option we are going to call this callback function, and inside this I'm going to create a button. So I'm going to create a button. So to create a HTML tag inside our JavaScript file, we have to use this function document dot create element, and then inside this we have to give whatever tag we want. Since we want button, we have to add button here. Now this button variable is a HTML button. So after that, for this button I'm going to, so inside this button we have to capture these values. Since those are passed inside our this, so sorry, this should be option or anything you want, and then give the value for this. So after that, let's display the question. So let's call the display question function. So now if you see our output, you can see we are getting our question, but we are not getting options. That's because, okay, we have to add this button element for this options, for this div tag with class name options. So these options are selected inside our options. So we have to give that and then we have to append this button. Now if you see the output, we are getting those options. So now let me explain what this display function is doing. So inside our display question function, first we are accessing the object by its by the index value. So initially the index value is 0. That means we are accessing the first object from this questions array, and we are storing that value inside our current question variable. So this current question variable will references the current object based on the current index value. So after that, since we want to add a question inside our inside our this h3 tag with class name question, we are using that. So we are storing that inside our question variable. Since we want to add a content inside our inside this h3 tag, so for that we have to use this .nr html, and then we are giving the value as a question. Since the question is inside this question property, we are giving that as this current question dot question. So after that we have to display options. As you can see here below the question, we are having options. So since our all our options are inside this array, first we have to loop through this array by using for each function. On every element we are calling this callback function, and in the callback function we are creating a button by using document.createElement function, and then storing that value inside this button variable. So and we are adding content to this button by using .nr property, and then giving value as option. So for the first iteration, the value of this option argument is push. So that's why we are getting push here. And for the second iteration, the value of this option will be shift, and then that's why we are getting shift. And for the same unshift and add, we are creating a button and adding a content by using this inner HTML property and giving the value as option. So after that, since you can see below the question, we have created a div tag with class name options, and inside these options we are going to store all the buttons with content of option. So which will be this array. That's why we have added options and then append child with this button. So now, as you can see here, we are having the options in same column, but in here we are having the options in same row. Let's change this to this. So for that, all our buttons are inside these options, because after writing this code internally, it will add like this button. Since we are having four options, it will create like this, and then inside it will create like this push, and then after writing this this code internally, it will create buttons like this inside these options. So now let's open the browser to see the output. So if you see the output, we are getting the options for multiple times, because we have added buttons manually in the HTML page, as well as we are creating buttons from our JavaScript code here. You can see we are telling document.createElement. That's why we are getting two times. So let me remove those. So now as you can see, we are not displaying anything in our div tag with class name options. But now if you see the output, let me open browser console, not console elements. Let me minimize it. So now inside this quiz container and inside this options, you can see we are getting those buttons push, shift, unshift, add inside the div tag with class name options. But if you see here, we are not entering anything. But how those are appearing here? So that's because we have created here. We are creating buttons here. That's why we are getting those here. So these values should be dynamic. That's why we have created those buttons inside our JavaScript file. So since all our buttons are inside these options, we have to select that inside our CSS file by using dot options and just make display flex and give the flex direction as column. So now if you see the output, our options are displaying on same row. Let's give some gap by using gap property and give the gap of 10 pixels between each option. So now there is a gap. So after that, let's give some styles to this button. Since our buttons are inside our options, we have to give dot options and then button. Then let's give some padding of 10 pixels and give border radius of 10 pixels. So now if you see the output, those styles are applied. And now let's add some black background color by using background color. Give this and let's give some light color. So now if you see the output, those background color has appeared, but as you can see, we are not able to see the options clearly because of this black color. Let's change the background. Let's change the font color from black to white as well as remove the border so that it will look good. Let's remove the border and give the color font color to be white and let's increase the font size to 20 pixels. So now if you see the our output, it is looking good, right? So let's make the cursor pointer. So like after your other hovers on this button, let's change that by using cursor pointer. So after that, if we hover on the button, a hand icon is displaying. So now let's add a functionality to these buttons. Like if I click on any option from this, we have to redirect the user to the next question. So for that, we have to add an on-click attribute for this button. So since our button is inside this, we have to add an on-click for this button dot on click. On clicking this button, we are going to call a function called check answer. So this check answer function is responsible for checking whether the option selected by user is correct or not. So let's create that check answer function. Function check answer. So we have to pass the answer which is selected by user to this check answer function. So for that we have to give this give this option as an argument and then accept that. Let's give a parameter like user selected option. So inside this function, first we will check if the user selected option is equal to. So we have to check that user answer with this answer. Since this answer is inside this object, we have to give this code in order to access that object and paste it inside here. So now if the user selected option is equal to current question dot answer. So if the user selects the correct answer, we are going to push that answer to an array to keep track the correct answers which are selected by users. So I'm going to create a variable like user user correct answers. So initially it will be an empty array But if user selects the correct option, we are going to push that answer to this user correct answers array, push the user selected option. After that, we're going to create another if condition to check whether the current index is less than the length of this questions array. Questions dot length. So if it is true, we are going to increase the current index by using this post increment operator and then display the next question. So after writing this, so let me explain that. So after clicking on any button, we are getting previous options as well. So select this. Okay, we are getting all options instead of the current question options. So for that, okay, we have to make this to be an empty string. Now let's check whether it's working or not. Okay, now it's working. Now let me explain how it's working. So like if I click on this, we're redirecting to the next question. So let me refresh this. So after clicking on any option, it will call this check answer function, and this check answer, and inside this check answer function, we are checking whether the other selected option is correct or not. If it is correct, we are pushing that answer to this other correct answers array, and then after that we are checking whether the current index, which is 0, is less than questions dot length or not. So this questions dot length means, since we are having four elements, the length of this is 4. So it will check whether if 0 is less than 4 or not. 0 is less than 4, right? So because so this condition is true. Since it is true, it is updating the current index value from the previous value, which is 0. So after this code, so after this line, the current index value will be 1, and then we are calling this display quotient function. So now again it will go inside this display quotient function, and it will, so the current index, so now the current index value is 1, right? Because we are incrementing this. So now since it is index number is 1, this current question variable is now references this second object. So after that, we will display the second question, which is this one, what does the type of operator, and then we are telling that options like this to be an empty, because if we remove this, even after selecting any option, we will get those previous options, but if we add this, we will not get those previous options, because after clicking on any option, we are telling the options.innerHTML to be an empty string, so that the previous values will not be appeared. So now if I, so since it is a first question, let me select that push. So now the current index value is 1. If I click on any option again from this, so if I click on this, now it will again go to this check answer function. It will call this check answer function, and inside that we are checking whether answer is correct or not. If correct, it will push that answer, and then we are checking whether the current index value, which is 1 here, now the current index value is 1. So if 1 is less than 4, we are again incrementing the value. So now the value is 2, and then again we are calling display question function. Now it will again go inside this, and now this current question will reference this third element, and then we are displaying the third elements question, which is this. and then we have to make the options content to be empty, otherwise it will display the previous options as well. And then after that, again, if we select on any option from third question, it will call this function, and then it will check the current index is less than or not. If it is less than that, we are going to increment the current index value and then displaying the question value. Now let's open the browser. So let me select some random options. So this is our last question, right? Here you can see this is our last question. So after selecting this, we have to display the result. So for that, we have to write an else block here. So inside this, we are going to call a function like display the result. I'm going to create it. So if this is false, we are going to call this display result function. So the value of this current index is more than this length once it reaches to the last question. Select. So at this point, if I click on anything, the current index value will be more than this questions dot length, which is 4. So if it is greater, if the current index is greater than this length, we are going to call this display result function. So this display result function is responsible for displaying the result. So let me create that function using function display result. So inside this, we are going to add all the content which should be in the result page. Since we are going to add all our result in this div tag with class name result container. So for that, first let's select this div tag with class name result container in our JavaScript file. So I'm going to add here. Let's create a variable called result container, and inside this result container, we're going to select that div tag with class name result container. So let's select here, we have to add dot because it is the class name. So now inside this result container, we are going to store a paragraph tag with class name user score, and after that we are going to create another paragraph tag. So inside this we have to give a class name for this paragraph tag, like all answers content. I'm bad at giving class names. Please ignore that. So after that, let's create a div tag with class name correct answers. So inside this, we are going to display all the correct answers, which are push, object, continue, and then document dot get elements by class name. So since we are having more than one answer, we are going to store those inside this div tag. So after that, let's select these class names inside our JavaScript file. So I'm going to create a variable with name user score, and inside this user score we are going to select that paragraph tag with class name user score dot user score, and then let's select this all answers content. I'm going to create all answers content, and inside this we are going to select that paragraph tag with class name all answers content. Let me copy this from here and paste it inside here. So after that, let's select this correct answers and store it in a variable called correct. So I have already given the correct answers. Okay, let's name it as all correct answers. And then inside this we are going to select that div tag with class name is that class name, correct answers. Let me copy this and paste it here. So now we have successfully connected all our HTML elements inside our JavaScript file, and we are storing every element inside a separate variable. So now if the current index is greater than this length, we are going to display the result, and inside this display result, so why when it reaches this result page, we have to make this question variable empty as well as this options class name to be empty. So for that, I'm going to select question. Since our question is selected and stored inside our question variable, here we have to select that, and then another HTML should be empty. After that, options should also be empty. But we have to update this heading from JavaScript quiz to result in the result page. So we have selected this class name and store it inside this heading variable. So let's select that and then add another HTML property, and then give a line like your result, and then after the result. So first of all, before that, let me click on it whether we are getting the result page or not. So now it is the last question. If I select on it, it is not redirecting us to the result page. I think we made some mistake somewhere. Cannot read properties of undefined reading question. So it's saying that it is unable to read the question property. I think okay, this should be -1. Now let's check whether it's working or not. Push object. Here you can see we are getting this string your result. That means we are successfully rendering the display result function once if the other selects anything from the last question. So before that, let me explain why I have given this length dot length -1. So if I, let me remove this first. So at this point, while displaying the first question, the value of current index is 0, right? It is 0. Let me add a comment so that you can understand why I have added dot length -1 here. So now the current index value is 0, right? So if we select any option from this, like if I click on this, it will call this check answer function, and inside this we are going to check whether the answer is correct or not. If correct, we are pushing that correct answer to an array, and then after that we are checking whether the current index is less than question dot length. So when it is displaying first question, the current index value is 0, right? So if 0 is less than question dot length, which means 4, this question dot length means it is 4, right? Because we have 4 objects inside our questions. So if 0 is less than 4, we are updating the current index value with the previous value plus 1. So now the value is 1, current index value, when it is second question. So at this point, when it is second question, the current index value is 1. So again, if we select any option from this second question, like if I click on this, again it will go to this check answer function, and inside this check answer function we are checking it whether the correct answer or not. And then after we are check current, so here at this point the current index value is 1. So since 1 is less than 4, we are again incrementing the current index value from the previous value. The previous value is 1, but after whether selects any option from the second question, we are going to update that with 2, and then we are calling the display question function. So at this point we are here. So now we are here. At this point the current index value is 2. So again, if I click on any option here, it will call the check answer function, and inside this check answer function, since the value is 2 and 2 is less than 4, we are incrementing the current index value with 1. So now it will be 3, and then we are calling display quotient function. So now the current quotient will represent this index, because now the current index value is 3. So now at this point, the value of the current index is 3. So now if we select, let me open the console. So now at this point, the current index value is 3, right? So if we select any option from this, we are getting error, because after selecting that, the current index, so it will call this check answer function, and inside this we are going to check the current index value, which is 3 is less than 4. So since 3 is less than 4, we are updating the current index value with 1. So now the current index value is 4, and then we are calling the display quotient function, and it will go to this display quotient function. Now this current quotient will represent the fourth index, but in our array we don't have any object for the fourth index number. Here you can see it- this object value is, this object value index number is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, but we don't have 4. But we are, after selecting this option, after selecting any option from this question, we are going to check. Let me remove this. So after, from this question, after selecting on anything, it will call this check answer function, and this will check the current index, which is 3 is less than quotient dot length 4, which is 4. Since 3 is less than 4, we are incrementing the current index value 4. So now the current index value is 4. After that, we are calling the display quotient function, and it will go inside this, and we are saying that quotient dot nrhtml is equal to current quotient dot quotient. But this properties does not exist, because now this current quotient is referencing the value at fourth index number, which is not there inside our questions array. That's why we are getting the error like, so this is the last question. If I select anything, we are getting error like cannot read properties of undefined reading question, because we don't have any value for the fourth index. That's why we are getting that. But if we enter -1 here, we are going to check the current index value with this question dot length -1, which is 4 minus 1, which is 3. So now if we select anything, we are getting that result page, because at this point the current index value is 3, right? But after selecting any option from this, it will go to the check answer function once we have selected any option from the fourth question, and then we are checking whether 3 is less than question dot length, which means 4, 4 minus 1, 3. Since 3 is not less than 3, we are going to this display result, because this value is false, right? So that's why we are getting that. So that's why I have added this -1 for this. So I think you have understood it, guys. If you don't understand, please watch it more than once so that you will understand. So now inside the display result function, we are going to add content inside this paragraph tag with class name user score. So this is selected inside our JavaScript, and we have stored that inside this user score variable, right? So we are going to get that user score variable, and inside that we are going to add content with, I'm going to use backticks, because we have to write a string as well as a dynamic value. So I'm going to write as you scored. Here we have to display the correct answers which are entered by user. Correct answers count. So since all the user corrected answers are inside this array, we are going to call that array. And in array we have a function called dot length, right? So it is used to get the length of the array. And then we have total questions of 4, so we are going to write out of 4. So now if we select, so I'm going to select all the correct answers. So to add an element to the end of the array, we are to use push function, right? So I'm selecting that, and the type of so the type of the null value is object in JavaScript, and which statement is used to skip the current iteration of the loop, which is continue, and which method is used to select the element by their class. It is document.get elements by class name. So if I select that, you can see we are getting the result of the user's correct answers. So let me refresh it. So if I enter correct answer, now let me enter all the wrong answers. So now if you see, we are only getting the score as 1. So we are getting this dynamic value because of this array. So let me console the user correct answers array. Now let's open the console. So initially we are not getting anything, but if we enter the correct answer, so I'm going to select the correct answer push. So if I enter that correct value, the user correct answers is updated with the correct answer and store it inside that correct answers array. So if I enter wrong option from this, like we are not we are not getting the wrong answers. I'm going to select the correct answers for it. Continue. So if I enter correct answer, it is updating that correct answer inside this array. If I enter this array, and then it will entering the correct answer. So since the correct answer's length is 3 now, because we have 3 elements, right? That's why we are getting this 3 out of 4. So if we enter all the wrong answers like this, we are getting 0 because we don't have any elements inside this. If we select 3 correct answers, not 3, let me select 4. So if I enter 4 correct answers, it will go to store that correct answers inside the correct answers array. And then since we have 4 elements, we are getting that we are getting 4 out of 4. So we are storing all that inside this user score, which is this paragraph tag. So now after that, we are going to select this all answers content, which is inside our all answers content variable. Let me select that dot nrhtml, and then inside this we are going to give a value content. We are going to add a content like below all are the correct answers. So now if we see the display result page, we are getting that content below are the correct answers. So below this string we are going to render all the correct answers. So for that, let me close this. Since we want to add all the correct answers content inside this correct answers div tag, and we are storing this inside our variable which is all correct answers. So all our correct answers are inside this correct answers variable, right? So I have to loop through this. So for that, I'm going to select the correct answers, and then I'm using for each. So inside this, I'm going to give an argument variable like argument name as correct answer, and then for every correct answer, we're going to create a button by using document.create element function. Document.create element and then button, and then we are storing that inside this button variable. So we are going to add the content inside our button with this correct answer, and then we are getting, okay, this should be small. After that, we have to append this button to this, what is that, correct answers, all correct answers, all correct answers dot append child, and then we're going to append this button value. So now let's check the result page. So we are getting all the correct answers here. So let me explain why this, how these values are getting. So all our correct answers are inside this correct answers array, right? Where is that? Here. So we are looping through every element, and we are creating a button for every element. Here you can see. So this so for the first iteration, this correct answer parameter argument will represent this push, and then we are creating a button, and we are adding a content to the button with this correct answer value, which is this push for the first iteration. And for the second iteration, this correct answer value will be this object, and then again we are creating a button as well as adding content and giving the value of this correct answer, which is this object. And for the third iteration, the correct answer argument is referencing this container, and for the fourth iteration it will represent this fourth value. That's why we are getting those answers inside our result page. So let's add some styles for this button so that it will look good. So since all our buttons since all our buttons are inside this correct answers variable, which is this, what this all correct answers is. So we are creating buttons inside this correct answers, right? So that we have to select this correct answers inside our CSS file. Let me select that correct answers correct answers. Okay. Now let's display to be flex and flex direction to be column. So now let me select all the correct options and then see the result page. Now we are getting like this. Let's make a gap of 10 pixels, and then inside we have buttons. Let's select that button. Let's give all the styles which I have given earlier for this. Let me copy it and then paste it here. Let me remove this cursor pointer because we don't need for the answers. So now if we select all the answers, so we are getting the answers with, so this answers is getting some good styles, right? So let me add a number for these answers. So this is first answer, right? And this is second, and this is third, and this is fourth. So let's add that, since those are inside this. So we're going to access a variable. That's why we're going to add this dollar sign. So to access variables, we have to write the syntax like this, dollar sign, and then let's add a argument like index. So for the first iteration, the index value is 0, right? So if I enter, since this index is a variable, we have to give index, or not here. This should be here, index, and then answer dot. this a string because it is common for every answer. So now if we see our display result output, we are getting the values, right? But for the first answer, it is displaying 0 because the first index value is 0. So let's add +1 here so that now the first index will be 1. So if you see the output, we are getting the first answer with 1a, and for the second answer, it is getting 2a, 3a, and then 4a. So now I think it's looking good, but as you can see here, we are having the JavaScript quiz content at the middle, but here we are getting those at left. Since this content is inside our h2 tag with class name heading, let's select that inside our CSS file dot quiz container. Let's select that by using dot quiz container and then dot heading. Let's make the text element to be center. So now if you see the output, we are getting that JavaScript quiz content text from left to middle. So now I think it's looking good. But in the result page, we don't have to display this timer. Since this timer is inside our paragraph tag with class name time left, and we are referencing this time left inside our JavaScript with this time left variable. So let's make that content to be an empty array by using this time left dot inner HTML and then empty. So when we are displaying the question, we are getting the text with time left. This is the last question. If I select this, we are going to redirect to the display result function, and the display result function, this text will not be visible. So if I select this, you can see we are not getting the time left text. So let's make this let's make this bigger, since we are giving since it is stored inside our this user score class. Let's select that by using dot result container and then dot user score. Let's make the text align center and then increase the font size to be some 22 pixel, and let's increase the font weight with bolder. So now if you see the display result output, we are getting like this, and let's make this center as well. So this content is inside this all answers content paragraph tag. So let's add styles to this. Let's select this and then paste it here. Let's make the text align to be center so that the text will be centered. So if we see the result page, we are getting all this in center. So now let's change the background color of these answers. So since these all are correct answers, let's add the background color as green. So for that, inside here, and then I'm changing the background color to green. So now if I enter, so now you can see the green background color has added. So after that, let's add an animation for these buttons as well. Like we'll rotate for 2 times. So for that, I'm going to use the animation here, and then I'm going to name it as button animation, and then this will be applied for 0 0.5 seconds, and then animation timing function will be linear, and the styles will be applied for 2 times. So now let's select this button animation by using @ keyframes, and then change this identifier to the animation name, which is button animation. So after that, when it is 0%, let's add transform property and then rotate to 0 degrees. Let me copy this for 5 times. 2, 3, 4, 5. And when it is 25%, I'm rotating to this to 3 degrees, and then when it is 50%, I'm rotating to this minus 3 degrees, and when it is 75%, I'm going to give 2 degrees, and for 100%, it will be 0 degrees. Now let's check whether those animations I have uploaded or not. So if I click on this, see the correct answers. You can see we are getting those animations. Let's give for 5 times so that you can clearly see it. So after going to the result function, you can see we are getting this animation for this buttons for 5 times. So now everything is fine, but we have to update. So we have to make this to be a dynamic value, like 10 for every second. We have to decrease this value from 10 to 9, 8, and then 6. So for that, we are going to create a function inside our JavaScript file, like with name. I'm going to name it as set timer. So this set timer function is used to display the time for every second. So display the time and update that for every second. So since this time left text is inside our this paragraph tag with class name time left, let me remove this from here. This should be dynamic. So this time left is selected inside our time left variable. So I have to select that inside here. Before that, first we have to initialize a value. Some I'm going to name it as the variable name as time. So inside that we have to enter the time that we want for every question. So since I want 10 seconds, I'm entering 10 here. So after that, let's create a timer, and then inside this we are going to use set interval function. So if you are familiar with JavaScript, I think you guys know about this set interval. It will take the first parameter as a callback function, and then second parameter will be milliseconds. So I'm going to enter 1000 here because I want to update this value for every second. So 1000 milliseconds is equals to 1 second, right? That's why I have 100,000 here. So after that, for every 1 second, we are going to call this callback function, and inside this, for every 1 second, we have to decrease this value, right? So to decrease this, simply enter that and then use this minus. So this is a decrement operator, and then after that, we have to check whether this time value is greater than or equal to 0 or not. So if it is greater than or equal to 0, we are going to update this value. Since this is inside our time left variable, I'm going to use time left, and then to add a content inside that we have to use this HTML property, and inside this I'm going to use template literals. After that, simply, so here we have to update the dynamic value. So the dynamic value is inside our time variable. So to use variables here, we have to use dollar sign and then curly braces, and then inside this simply enter the time variable. So we are getting errors. Could not find time timer. Okay, let me initialize it outside the function. Set timer. Now we cannot see any warnings here. So if time is greater than or equal to 0, we are going to display the time. Okay, let's open the browser and check whether it is working or not. Let me refresh it. Oh, that timer is not displaying here. That's because we are not calling this set timer function inside our display quotient function. We have to call this, right? Because if only we call this function, it is going to display this time. Because we are adding content inside this paragraph tag with class name time left inside our set timer function. So we have to call that inside our display point function, because this display point function is displaying the question, and inside this we are going to display the timer, right? So for that we have to call the set timer function. So now if we check the output, I think it will work. Yeah, you can see we are getting the time left and then updated value. For every second the value of this is decreasing, right? So when it reaches to this 0 seconds, we have to display the next question to the user. So for that, if the time left is 0, we have to go inside this and we have to write else block here. When the time is 0 seconds, that means user didn't select any option within this time. Since user does not didn't select any option within this time, we have to redirect the user to the next question. So when it reaches to 0 seconds, the code will go inside this else block, and inside this else block, we are going to check whether the current index value is less than or questions array dot length should be questions dot length minus 1. So if this is true, we are going to increment the current index value with 1 with the previous value plus 1, and then call the display question function so that it will display the next question. So at this point the current index value is 0, right? And the time left is 0. It is instantly redirecting us to the next question. Before that, let me enter 5 seconds here so that we can save the time. So if I refresh it, if this value reaches to the 0 seconds, we will go inside this else block. Is instantly redirecting us to the next question. Okay, to prevent that, we have to use this clear interval call this a clear interval function and reset this set interval function. Since that set interval function is stored inside our timer, we have to pass timer here. So now if we check the output, I think it will work. So when it is reaches to 0 seconds, yes, it is redirecting us to the next question, as well as it is recounting from 5 seconds. As you can see, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, it's working. So this is the last question, right? When it is reaches to the last question and the value is 0 seconds, we have to, so this will be false. Where at this point, when it reaches to the last question and the value is 0 seconds, this value will be false. So that if it is false, we are going to write else block. Since it is the last question, we have to display the result. So now let's check. Let me select an options here. Oh, I think we have made some errors. Okay, when user selects any option from this, we have to again reset the timer, right? So when we select anything, when we select any option, we are calling this check answer function, right? So inside this, we have to clear the timer by using clear interval function so that it will work as expected. So now let's check. If I click on any option, it resets the time and again start recounting from 5, 4, 3. If I select, you can see it is recounting from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now let's wait until the timer reaches to 0 seconds. So now as you can see, if user didn't select any option from the last question, it is redirecting us to the last result page. That's because when it reaches to the last question, the current and this will be false. Since it is false, it is redirecting us to this display result function, and display result function is displaying the result. So let me explain from first so that you will understand. So at this point, the current index value is 0, right? But when it reaches to 0 seconds, we're, we're going inside this else block, and inside this else block, we are checking the current index value, which is 0 when it is first question. Since 0 is less than 3, we are incrementing the current index value from its previous value plus 1. So now it will call the display question again, and we are calling this display question. Inside this, the current index value will be 1. Since the current index is 1, we are going to call the second question, and again the timer will be counts from 5 seconds. So again, if the other didn't select any option, we will go inside this else block and again check whether its current index is less than 3 or not. So here you can see, after hovering on any option, the background color is changing from gray to black. Let's add those styles to this document as well. So for that, we have to use this dot options, and then when we hover on that, we are going to add background color as a black. So now if we hover on this buttons, we are getting back black color. So let's add a let's add background color as white and the font color to be black once if user clicks on the button, so that they will know whether the button is clicked or not. So for that, we have to use dot options and then button. So I have to use this pseudo class called active, and inside this we are going to add a background color as white and the font color to be black. So now if user clicks on this button, you can see a white background color is adding. That's it for this video, guys. I hope you have understood this. Thanks for watching.